Welcome to Livo Wisdom in Every Wave. I am your host, and today we embark on a journey that challenges everything you thought you knew about the divine. We are diving into a masterpiece by the mystic Osho, titled, God is Not for Sale. In a world where religion often feels like a marketplace, Osho reminds us that the ultimate truth cannot be bought, sold, or organized. It is an inner experience, a silent explosion of consciousness. As you listen to this audiobook, let every word resonate within you. Don't just listen with your soul. Let's explore the profound insights of Osho together.
Yeah, and to really anchor ourselves in what we're about to explore today, we absolutely need to contextualize the text. Because this isn't some polished manuscript.
Right.
It wasn't carefully edited in a quiet study. We were looking at a living, breathing transcript. These are Osho's Darshan diaries.
Which are basically compilations of his intimate face-to-face dialogues, right, from late 1976, I think?
Exactly, late 1976. And it was a very specific cultural moment. You had all these seekers traveling from all corners of the globe, bringing this heavy hangover of post-industrial disillusionment.
Yeah, they were showing up with all their baggage.
Oh, entirely. They were bringing with their neuroses, their crumbling marriages, their physical ailments, just, spiritual dead ends.
And the core thread that ties every single one of these interactions together is Osho diagnosing this fundamental human error, right? The idea that we treat the divine like a transaction.
Precisely. We treat our own inner peace as a commodity. We operate under this deeply ingrained assumption that we can somehow buy grace.
It's like a spiritual stock market. We've completely gamified enlightenment. I mean, even today, you see it with mindfulness apps,
Like all the streaks and the badges.
Exactly. We want a streak. We want a quantifiable return on our spiritual investment.
Yeah, the ego really believes that if it just racks up enough cosmic currency, whether that's meditating for 10,000 hours or doing charity work, it could eventually just go to the checkout counter and purchase permanent bliss.
Which is wild.
It is. And Osho looks at this and completely shatters the paradigm. He asserts that existence is inherently a grace. It is a gift. You cannot put a down payment on a sunset.
Wow, yeah.
And you definitely cannot barter your way into the ultimate truth.
Which I have to say is going to be a very uncomfortable pill to swallow for anyone listening who considers themselves a high achiever.
Oh, without a doubt.
Because whether you are a devout seeker or a skeptic or just someone who is profoundly burnt out by the modern hustle, this deep dive is designed to dismantle your relationship with effort.
And we are so hardwired to believe that friction equals progress, But Osho opens by just completely dismantling the traditional concept of renunciation.
Right. He draws this really hard line between what he calls old renunciation and positive renunciation.
Yeah. And we have to examine the psychology of that old renunciation to understand why it fails so spectacularly. Historically, asceticism has been rooted in this deep, seething hatred of the world.
It's basically an anti-life posture.
Exactly. Think of the monk who whips himself, or the ascetic who starves himself. They're giving up the physical world out of frustration or anger.
Or just this theological guilt that the material realm is inherently dirty.
Right. And Osho points out the psychological trap here. He says if you renounce the world out of anger, you are still completely obsessed with it.
Because your renunciation is just a violent reaction.
Yes. It requires immense, exhausting willpower to sustain. You are constantly fighting your own nature.
It really reminds me of the psychological rebound effect. Like, if I try to quit a bad habit through sheer white-knuckled willpower, I am thinking about that habit 24 hours a day.
The repression actually amplifies the obsession.
Exactly. Osho is basically saying that fighting the world just binds you to it more tightly.
Well, the mind fixates on what it is denied. So Osho introduces positive renunciation. And this flips the entire mechanism.
How so?
He says true renunciation has absolutely nothing to do with forcing yourself to give things up. Instead, it is the natural byproduct of saying a profound, total yes to life.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's such a deep immersion into the present moment that the superficial, irrelevant things just simply fall away on their own.
Like, you don't drop the toy because you're angry at it. You drop the toy because you've suddenly noticed the vastness of the ocean in front of you.
That is the exact mechanism. The toy just loses its gravity. You never use willpower to renounce. It happens in a state of absolute let go.
Which bridges directly to the central thesis, right? God is not for sale.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because if you are renouncing the world in order to secure a spot in heaven, you are still bargaining. You are at the negotiation table saying, look at all the suffering I endured.
Right, look at the earthly pleasures I sacrificed. Now pay up.
Exactly. It's a business transaction.
Mm.
But Osho says true surrender. The Sanskrit term is tyagi only ever happens out of love. Without love, your asceticism is just masochism.
So real surrender requires a shift away from that aggressive posture.
Right, you have to move into a completely passive, receptive state. He frequently calls this entering a feminine state of energy. You stop trying to hunt down the divine.
You just create the hollow space within yourself to allow grace to penetrate you.
Precisely. And there is this brilliant, almost comedic anecdote in the diaries that illustrates this so well.
Oh, the Zen master story.
Yes, it shows how completely decoupled this truth is from our human branding. So, a Christian monk travels to a Zen monastery in Japan.
Okay.
He sits down with the Zen master and starts reading from the New Testament, specifically the Sermon on the Mount. He reads, "Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the meek, because they shall inherit the earth."
And what happens?
Well, before the monk can even utter the name of Jesus or explain any theology, the Zen master holds up a hand, stops him, and says, "Whosoever said that is a Buddha."
I love that. It's such a profound moment.
It really is, because the Zen master has zero context for Jesus. He doesn't know the history or the religious dogma, but he immediately recognizes the resonance of the truth.
He recognizes the phenomenological state of the person who uttered those words.
Exactly. And Osho uses this to explain that true affinity with the divine is entirely post-tribal. It doesn't matter if you label it Christian, Buddhist, or Hindu.
Those are just different architectural windows looking into the exact same central temple.
Right. And the tragedy of organized religion is that people spend their entire lives worshiping the window frame. They argue over the shape of the glass without ever actually looking through it.
And once you look through and see the temple, you realize every window is yours. But okay, wait. I have to push back on this concept of passive reception for a second.
Go for it.
Because practically speaking, if I want to master a complex skill, if it's learning the piano or mastering astrophysics, I cannot just sit passively and wait for the knowledge to penetrate me.
Sure.
I have to put in thousands of hours of grueling, active effort. If I take Osho's advice literally, doesn't dropping all aggressive effort just lead to spiritual lethargy? How do you actually arrive anywhere without pushing?
Well, that is the defining paradox of the spiritual search. And Osho does not shy away from it. Seekers constantly asked him how to balance making an effort with waiting for grace.
And what does he tell them?
He doesn't tell them to stop trying. Actually, he says you must work incredibly hard, but, and this is the razor's edge, you must do so with the absolute humbling understanding that your work alone cannot force the ultimate event to occur.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he uses this metaphor. Man's hands are very small, and the sky is infinitely vast.
Yeah.
You cannot reach up and capture the sky in your hands, but you must reach anyway.
So the effort isn't a transaction. It's more like a declaration of intent.
Perfectly stated.
It's preparing the soil, even though you have absolutely no control over whether it rains.
Exactly. Your effort, your meditation techniques, your self-inquiry, none of this buys the result. What it does is exhaust the ego.
You just do absolutely everything you are capable of until the mind finally realizes its own limitations.
Right. You push yourself to the absolute frontier of your own capability, and then you wait with infinite patience. Osho posits that grace only descends at the precise intersection of total human effort and the passive, alert patience of surrender.
So if you only rely on effort, your ego inflates and you become spiritually arrogant.
Yes. And if you only wait and do nothing, you decay into inertia. The magic happens when the exhaustion of the doer meets the readiness of the receiver.
Okay, so if trying too hard to muscle our way into clarity just reinforces the ego, what happens when the mind begins to buckle under the weight of its own futility?
Well, this is where the text takes a really sharp turn into modern psychology.
Yeah, this part is fascinating. He has this extended dialogue with a seeker who is a trained psychotherapist.
And he essentially diagnoses our modern mental health crisis as a mislabeled spiritual crisis. It's one of the most intellectually aggressive parts of the book.
He tells the therapist that Western psychotherapy is fundamentally incomplete, right?
He does. He acknowledges its utility, like it's very good at taking someone who is deeply maladjusted and patching them up just enough so they can function in society again.
Surface level readjustment.
Exactly. But he argues that when a patient hits a wall, when therapy plateaus and the person is just looping through their trauma without resolution, that is the exact moment meditation must take over.
Because at its deepest root, psychological illness is actually what he calls a religious illness.
Yes, a religious illness.
Meaning like existential displacement. We obsess over fixing the leaky faucet because we can't handle the fact that the entire house is built on a fault line.
That is a great way to put it. It is a crisis of ultimate meaning. On the surface, the patient presents with generalized anxiety or depression, but beneath that clinical terminology is an existential terror.
The person just cannot figure out why they exist in a void.
And Osho makes a claim here that is wildly provocative.
Yeah.
He asserts that the more intelligent you are, the more likely you are to suffer from this psychological illness.
He practically says that anxiety is the tax you pay for high intelligence.
He does not mince words. He says that people operating at a lower level of sensitivity, and he bluntly calls them stupid, live purely mechanical lives.
Wow, stupid.
Yeah, he uses that word. He says they act like cogs, they wake up, they punch the clock at work, they eat, they reproduce, they sleep.
Completely anesthetized to the vast, terrifying emptiness of a life without inherent meaning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But an intelligent, sensitive mind cannot stay anesthetized forever.
Yeah.
They look at the universe, they see the void, and they feel the crushing weight of their own insignificance.
But staring directly into that abyss is just too much for the human nervous system to bear, right?
It is. So what does the brilliant, terrified mind do as a defense mechanism? It invents what Osho calls pseudo-problems.
Pseudo-problems. Okay, give me an example of how that works in real time.
Well, a pseudo-problem is a localized, solvable distraction. The mind says, I am deeply miserable. Why? It must be because I am in the wrong career.
Or it's because my spouse doesn't understand me.
Or it's because I live in the suburbs instead of the city.
Mm-hmm.
These are brilliant deflections because they give the ego something to do.
Right, you can divorce your spouse, you can quit your job.
You can move across the country. But Osho highlights the tragedy of this cycle. You change everything, and 6 months later, the exact same hollow misery comes creeping back under the door.
Because the basic problem was never the job or the spouse.
Exactly. The basic problem is that you are demanding ultimate cosmic meaning from temporal, fleeting things that simply cannot provide it.
It's brilliant, really. The ego creates a puzzle it knows it can solve, so it doesn't have to face the puzzle it can't.
And in the text, he specifically critiques the popular therapeutic modalities of the 1970s, like EST, the Erhard Seminars training.
Right, 2 EST representatives actually come to him.
Yeah, and his critique of EST applies to almost all modern intense therapeutic interventions. He tells them, look, your process works up to a point.
Meaning those intensive weekend retreats give a person a mini satori?
A sudden cathartic release where they feel weightless and integrated. But Osho warns that because it remains strictly within the domain of the mind, it's fragile.
So if the therapist doesn't guide the person beyond psychological integration into the spiritual realm of no mind, pure awareness, the ego just regroups.
Right. He says a crust just settles back over the person. They get a brief, soaring glimpse of the Himalayan peaks, but within a week, the psychological clouds roll back in.
And they are back in the valley, clinging to a new set of pseudo-problems.
Exactly.
I hear the philosophical depth there, but I really have to play devil's advocate for a second.
Good.
If someone is clinically depressed, like if their neurochemistry is actively working against them and they can barely get out of bed, is Osho really suggesting we bypass clinical treatment?
It's a fair question.
Because telling them they're just suffering from a lack of God borders on spiritual bypassing, which can be incredibly dismissive of real physiological suffering.
It's a vital distinction to make. But Osho isn't dismissing their suffering. He is radically elevating the status of the sufferer.
Elevating them how?
Think about how modern society treats mental illness. We pathologize it. We tell the person they are broken, that their brain chemistry is wrong, and they need to be fixed so they can be normal again.
Right.
Osho tells the psychotherapist to treat these patients with profound reverence. He says these people are the cream of society.
The sensitive ones.
Yes. The artists, the deep thinkers, whose internal alarms are ringing because they have realized the societal script is a lie.
Wow.
He argues that labeling them sick is destructive because it makes them feel ashamed of their own awakening. You shouldn't try to cram them back into the mechanical box of normalcy.
You should validate their terror as the first necessary step toward spiritual liberation.
Exactly. Their pain isn't a disease. It's the birth pangs of a higher consciousness that they simply lack the tools to navigate yet.
That is a staggering reframe. You aren't broken, you're just paying attention.
Yeah.
But that heightened sensitivity, that desperate attempt to fill the void, is exactly what drives the most intelligent among us to become creators, right? We try to build a legacy to stave off the emptiness.
Which brings us directly to Osho's analysis of the creative process and this concept of the cyclone of creativity.
This comes up in a dialogue with a seeker who is a writer and a teacher, I believe.
It does. The seeker is agonizing over their process. They describe this paralyzing, feverish tension that takes over the exact moment they try to create something.
They get so anxious they end up procrastinating, like cleaning the house or talking to neighbors just to escape the unbearable buzzing electricity of the blank page.
And I think literally every writer, artist, or coder listening knows that exact somatic sensation.
Oh, 100%. It feels like your nervous system is vibrating at a frequency that is just slightly too high for your physical body to contain.
Exactly. And our instinct is to pathologize that feeling, to think, I must be doing this wrong, I need to calm down.
But Osho normalizes it entirely, doesn't he?
Completely. He tells the seeker that this frenzy is the fundamental nature of creation. He says plainly that normal, perfectly adjusted, totally balanced people do not create anything.
So creation requires an imbalance.
Yes. A Van Gogh, a Beethoven, a Picasso, they are bound to be somewhat neurotic because they are acting as conduits for forces larger than their individual egos.
True creativity is not a polite hobby.
No, Osho describes it as a demon that possesses you. It drives you to the brink of madness, destroys your old self, and renews you.
The tension isn't a sign of failure. It's the literal pressure of something new trying to be born through your physical vessel.
Exactly.
So what is the prescription? I mean, how do you survive the demon without it burning you alive?
His advice is radical acceptance. Stop fighting the frenzy. Stop trying to meditate your way into a calm, sterile state when you are supposed to be creating.
Right.
He uses this incredible metaphor of a river hitting a steep drop. When the river goes over the waterfall, it is pure chaos. It is violent. It is a frenzy.
But the water doesn't resist the fall.
No, it roars, it sings, it dances through the chaos. When a cyclone hits the ocean, the waves become monstrous, but it's just the ocean expressing its wildness.
So Osho tells the creator that their suffering only exists because they are standing in the middle of a beautiful cyclone demanding that the wind stop blowing.
Yes. He says, accept the feverishness delightfully. If the process is rough, let it be rough. Ride the wave of it so happily that you are actually moving ahead of the frenzy.
Dictating the pace rather than being dragged behind it by your own resistance. Ride the wave without trying to control the ocean.
That's the essence of it.
And this connects to one of the most paradoxical yet practical concepts in the entire book, the idea of effortless effort.
It sounds like an oxymoron, doesn't it?
Totally. If I am caught in a creative cyclone expending massive amounts of energy, how can the effort possibly be effortless?
Well, it comes down to the underlying psychology of the action. Osho explains it by pointing to children at play.
Oh, the sandcastle analogy.
Right. Watch a child building a massive, intricate sandcastle on the beach under the hot sun. They are sweating, they're carrying heavy buckets of water.
They're working with total laser-like focus. Physiologically, it is an immense expenditure of energy.
Yet, psychologically, it is completely effortless. Why? Because there is absolutely zero motive.
The child isn't building the castle to sell it for a profit?
No. They aren't building it to put on a resume or to impress their parents or to secure a legacy. They're doing it purely for the intrinsic joy of the doing.
And the moment the sun starts to set, they will gleefully jump on the castle, destroy it, and walk away without a second thought.
Because the value is in the process, not the product. Osho says the same dynamic applies to a master painter lost in their canvas, or two lovers making love.
The logical, calculating mind divides reality into work, which is taxing, and rest, which is replenishing.
But in this state of flow, work becomes rest. The contradiction vanishes the moment you engage in an action with absolutely no motive other than the immediate visceral pleasure of the action itself.
Okay, but let me ground this in our reality for a second. We live in a capitalist system.
Sure.
We have mortgages, we have deadlines, we have KPIs. If I just embrace the frenzy of my work and lean into the chaos, aren't I just giving myself a philosophical excuse to burn out?
It's a valid concern.
How do we differentiate between a divine, creative flow state and a fast track to adrenal fatigue?
That is the essential test of effortless effort. Burnout is never caused by hard work alone. Burnout is caused by the friction of motive.
The friction of motive.
Yes. When you are pushing yourself to achieve a specific result, to get the promotion, to hit a financial target, to prove your worth to your peers, you are operating out of a state of lack and anxiety.
Your energy is leaking into the future, worrying about the outcome.
And that friction shreds your nervous system. Divine frenzy, on the other hand, actually replenishes your spiritual battery, even as it drains your physical one.
Think of it like the difference between sprinting for your life because a predator is chasing you versus running a marathon because you love the feeling of your lungs expanding.
Both leave you physically exhausted. But one traumatizes your body with cortisol, while the other leaves you glowing, flooded with endorphins and a sense of deep integration.
So if you are feeling hollowed out and burned out by your work, it is a glaring diagnostic indicator that you are operating from ego and motive, not from play.
Exactly. The motive is the friction.
That's a massive takeaway. But, even if we manage to drop the motive and we allow this pure, playful cyclone of energy to move through us, it is still an overwhelming amount of voltage for a human body to process.
It is. If you don't ground that energy, it can completely destabilize you. And Osho gets surprisingly somatic here. He moves away from philosophy and gives very specific physiological instructions on how to handle this charge.
Specifically focusing on the hara.
Right. This is where Osho's mastery of the subtle body really comes into play.
Throughout the diaries, multiple seekers come to him terrified by bizarre physical phenomena. One person describes getting a blinding migraine that leaves their face numb and disconnects them from their own vocal cords.
Which is terrifying.
Oh.
And another seeker describes a sensation like a cold rain falling inside their internal organs, accompanied by a sudden, violent urge to just scream and tear the room apart.
Right, which, if you don't have a spiritual framework for it, just feels like a localized psychotic break. They think they're losing their minds.
But Osho calmly reassures them that these are incredibly auspicious signs.
Yes. What they're experiencing is a massive influx of dormant cosmic energy prana, or chi, suddenly awakening and flooding their nervous system. And the physical body simply hasn't developed the neurological pathways to conduct that much voltage yet, so the system temporarily shorts out.
Exactly. The crisis, Osho explains, is a matter of containment. Westerners, in particular, tend to hold all their energy in their heads, constantly thinking and analyzing, or in their chests, locked up in turbulent emotions.
If you let this awakened energy pool in your head or your heart, the pressure becomes unbearable.
You will feel tense, restless, and you will have an overwhelming, almost violent compulsion to freak out. To cry, scream, run, or vent the energy just to relieve the internal pressure.
It really sounds like a capacitor in an electrical circuit. If you push a massive surge of raw voltage through a delicate wire like the analytical mind, it just fries the fuse.
Right.
You have to route it to a battery that can actually store the charge.
That is the perfect analogy, and Osho identifies that battery. He warns them that freaking out and venting the energy is a tragic waste of a profound spiritual resource.
You are throwing away the gold just because it's heavy.
So he instructs them to consciously, intentionally guide this energy downward, away from the chaos of the head and the chest, and let it pool in the belly.
Specifically, a point about 2 inches below the navel, right?
Yes. In Japanese martial and spiritual traditions, this center is called the hara.
The hara. That word carries a lot of cultural weight. It literally translates to something quite dark, doesn't it?
It literally means death.
Yeah.
It is the same linguistic root used in harakiri, the ritual suicide by disembowelment.
Wow.
But Osho unpacks the profound dual nature of this center. Yes, the hara is the center of death. It is where the individual ego goes to die. But precisely because it is the center of death, it is the only place in the human subtle body that is vast enough, dark enough, and grounded enough to simultaneously contain the absolute fullness of life.
The head cannot hold it. It shatters. The heart cannot hold it. It breaks.
But the hara can hold the infinite. Osho tells the seekers to literally visualize that internal electrical storm, that internal rain, falling down through the body and pooling in this deep, silent, well below the navel.
And he promises that once the energy sinks into the hara, the manic urge to scream or act out instantly evaporates.
The energy becomes safely contained. It stews there, transforming, until eventually it radiates out of the person naturally. Not as a chaotic freakout, but as an undeniable aura of silence, gravity, and grace.
But practically speaking, in the middle of modern life, how do you execute that?
Oh.
Like, if my boss is yelling at me or I'm stuck in gridlock traffic and my head feels like it's going to explode with stress and energy, I can't exactly drop into a lotus pose and visualize my internal battery.
Osho knew this.
Yeah.
Which is why he provided what he called the shortest, most immediate meditation in the world.
Oh, this stop exercise?
Yes. It requires zero equipment and no special posture. He assigns a seeker to do this 6 times a day, completely randomly.
Wherever you are, whatever mundane thing you're doing.
Whether you are walking down the street, reaching for a coffee cup, or mid-sentence in a conversation, you suddenly violently freeze for exactly half a minute.
Stop every single physical movement.
And instantly command your mind to stop all thought. Just give a sudden shock to your entire mechanism and become totally, piercingly present.
It's like pulling the emergency brake on your own consciousness. Just a sudden, jarring freeze frame.
Exactly. And the mechanics of why this works are fascinating. The human mind operates mechanically, anticipating the next moment, building a continuous bridge of thought.
But by abruptly stopping without warning, the mechanical mind is caught off guard.
It halts for a fraction of a second. In that sudden, suspended silence, a gap opens up in your programming.
It's as if the dense clouds of your neuroses part for just an instant, allowing a shaft of sunlight, the divine, witnessing energy, to pierce through to the hara.
Osho is very strict about the time limit, though. He says do it for only half a minute.
Why half a minute?
If you try to hold it for a minute or longer, the ego recovers from the shock. The mind steps back in and says, "Look at me. I am meditating so beautifully. I am standing so still."
So the magic is entirely in the suddenness and the brevity.
Yes. It trains your nervous system to tolerate the shock of the present moment, grounding you back into your center instantly.
That is incredibly actionable. Anyone listening to this can try that today. Just stop.
Right.
But as profound as that internal containment is, there's a massive difference between holding your center when you are alone in the room and holding it when you are entangled with another human being.
Oh, absolutely.
Which leads us into a deeply uncomfortable but necessary territory. Osho's views on relationships, intimacy, and the courage to endure pain.
Osho is notoriously merciless when it comes to the spiritual romanticization of isolation.
He has deep contempt for the historical tradition of monks fleeing to Himalayan caves to avoid the messiness of human relationships.
He calls it outright cowardice. It is incredibly easy to feel peaceful, holy, and contained when you're sitting alone in a cave because there is no one there to step on your ego.
But Osho says that relationships are the ultimate spiritual mirrors.
Yes. The presence of the other forcefully reflects your true, unedited face back to you. The moment you are in a relationship, your hidden jealousy, your rage, your deep-seated possessiveness, they all rise to the surface.
He diagnoses that people avoid deep, authentic intimacy not because they don't want love, but because they are terrified of looking into the mirror and seeing their own ugliness.
Exactly. And he drills down into a very specific psychological dynamic that ruins most romantic relationships.
He says the root cause of our misery with our partners is that we enter the relationship wanting to be loved.
Which sounds entirely normal to most of us.
Right. What is the danger in wanting to be loved?
The danger is that the desire to be loved is fundamentally a manifestation of the ego. It is a state of psychological beggary.
Meaning it stems from a gaping, unhealed wound within yourself, the fear that you are insignificant.
Yes.
Yeah.
You approach a partner subconsciously demanding, "You must love me to prove that I am worthy of existence. You must validate me."
And if you enter a relationship as a beggar demanding alms, you will be perpetually miserable because no human being can adequately fill your existential void.
The other person will inevitably fail your impossible standards, and you will resent them for it.
So Osho flips the script entirely.
He does. The secret to a divine relationship is that you must completely drop the demand to be loved and focus entirely on the act of giving love.
And you give it like the sun gives heat, without discrimination, without a ledger, without demanding that the other person is worthy of it.
Exactly. When you love an imperfect person unconditionally, without trying to extract validation from them, a transcendent perfection starts to arise in the space between you.
That is beautiful in theory, but he does not let his seekers off the hook with poetic platitudes. He dives straight into the gritty, painful reality of dropping our masks.
There's a specific dialogue with the couple where he gives them advice that goes against every instinct of self-preservation we have in modern dating.
Yes, he instructs them on the mechanics of total vulnerability, and it is brutal.
He tells them that the capacity for pleasure and the capacity for pain are intrinsically linked. They use the same neurological pathways.
In our fear, we constantly try to control our partners and edit our own behavior to avoid getting hurt. We wear masks, we tell polite lies.
But Osho argues that if you armor yourself to limit your vulnerability to pain, you simultaneously inevitably numb your capacity to experience deep pleasure and joy.
If you play it safe, you flatten the entire spectrum of human feeling into a dull gray.
And his practical application of this radical honesty is terrifying. He looks at the man in the relationship and says, essentially, if you are walking down the street and a beautiful woman walks by and a spark of sexual desire arises in your mind, you must go home and tell your partner.
You must voice every passing thought, no matter how inconvenient, to completely destroy the masks between you.
Right.
But I have to push back hard on this.
Okay, let's hear it.
If I am experiencing a fleeting, meaningless attraction, and I decide to dump that information onto my partner in the name of radical honesty, aren't I just assuaging my own guilt?
It's a tough question.
Aren't I inflicting totally unnecessary insecurity and pain on someone I love, just to keep my own spiritual ledger clean? Where's the line between transparency and emotional cruelty?
It's the most natural objection to this teaching. But Osho's counter-argument is that protecting your partner from the truth through polite deception creates a subtle, invisible distance.
It builds a wall constructed of 1,000 tiny, unspoken lies.
Yes. Over time, you aren't in a relationship with a real person. You are in a relationship with the heavily curated avatar they present to you.
Right.
Yes, telling the unvarnished truth will cause pain. Osho is completely transparent about that. He says the truth will be bitter. It will sting.
But he argues that facing this specific kind of pain together is a cleansing fire. It burns away the illusions you hold about each other.
Most importantly, it destroys the toxic, possessive idea that you own your partner's mind and desires.
So if you can survive that initial blast of egoic pain, if you can be raw enough to share your darkest truths, and your partner can hear them and still hold you, a completely new, indestructible quality of intimacy arises.
Exactly. It is an intimacy anchored in bedrock reality, rather than a fragile, polite societal fiction that could shatter at any moment.
It requires an unbelievable level of unselfishness and trust. And it ties perfectly into another major trap Osho warns about. If the ego can disguise itself as wanting to be loved in romance, it has an even more insidious disguise in society: the do-gooder.
This is undoubtedly one of Osho's most contrarian and brilliant sociological takes. He warns seekers, never be a do-gooder. These are the most mischievous, dangerous people in the world.
Which sounds shocking. We are conditioned to revere do-gooders.
But Osho is analyzing the hidden motive. When someone makes it their identity to do good, whether they are a public servant, a charity worker, or even a parent constantly reminding their child of the sacrifices they made out of duty, the ego heavily infiltrates the action.
The do-gooder develops a holier-than-thou complex. By saving people, you subtly humiliate them. You place them in your moral debt.
You're using charity to buy a sense of superiority. And the debt always comes due.
The transaction is hidden, but it's there.
The do-gooder inevitably demands a return on their moral investment. They want respect, profound gratitude, obedience.
Like the parent who says, "I sacrificed my youth for you, now you must obey my career choices for you."
Right. And when that return isn't paid, the do-gooder's underlying anger and resentment violently boil over. Osho says that duty is a four-letter word. It is a dirty concept.
True virtue, true good, only ever manifests when the ego is completely absent. You don't try to be a good person.
You simply focus on becoming totally silent, joyous, and overflowing with love, and from that overflowing state, good actions happen naturally.
As a mere byproduct of your existence with absolutely zero expectation of a reward or even a thank you.
Exactly.
And this unmasked, expectation-free way of moving through the world naturally forces us to abandon our rigid, meticulously plotted life plans.
Because if you aren't acting out of motive, you can't adhere to a 5-year plan.
It forces us to step completely off the mapped-out highway of societal expectations and wander into the terrifying freedom of the unknown.
Which brings us to the final, profound arc of our deep dive today. The concept of the wanderer, the wheel of duality, and the liberation of becoming a nobody.
Right. During an initiation, Osho gives a seeker a new name, Batoi, which translates from Hindi as the wanderer.
And he draws a razor-sharp philosophical distinction between a wayfarer and a wanderer. A wayfarer is someone on a journey. They have a map, they have a timeline, and most importantly, they have a destination.
But Osho argues that having a destination is a psychological prison.
If your mind is fixated on the goal, whether the goal is a promotion, marriage, or spiritual enlightenment, you are constantly sacrificing the living reality of the present moment for an imagined, non-existent future.
You are reducing now to a mere stepping stone.
Exactly. A wanderer, conversely, is a gypsy of the soul. They have no goal, they have no final destination. They are moving purely for the intrinsic joy of movement.
Because they have nowhere they have to be, they are wildly, terrifyingly free to experience the total multi-dimensional depth of the present moment.
And to be a wanderer, you have to let go of your identity as an achiever. He introduces this concept of shunyam.
Yes, shunyam. It is a Sanskrit word that roughly translates to zero, emptiness, or nobodiness.
Osho diagnoses that almost all human anxiety, depression, and misery stem from the crushing, exhausting burden of trying to be somebody.
We desperately want to be a VIP. We want our names remembered. We want to be recognized.
We want our personal brand to be flawless. Osho tells the seekers, just try, for one day, living as a nobody. Accept that you are zero.
Realize that the universe will continue its magnificent dance perfectly well without your grand identity.
When you finally accept your own absolute nobodiness, the anxiety evaporates. And in the space left behind by that empty ego a profound divine presence floods in.
You become empty of yourself, but full of existence.
He uses this incredible paradox from the biblical tradition to explain this state of shunyam. It's a phrase most of us have heard, but he unpacks it completely differently.
He quotes the ancient saying that a wise man must be as cunning as a snake and as innocent as a dove.
On the surface, it's a logical contradiction. How can you be simultaneously deeply cunning and purely innocent? But Osho explains it mathematically.
These are two absolute opposing polarities.
The ultimate worldly cunning, the survival instinct of the snake, meets the ultimate divine vulnerability, the innocence of the dove.
And when you bring these two extremes together within your own being, they collide and negate each other. The plus and the minus cancel out.
The result is zero, shunyam. And what remains in that 0-point field is what Eastern philosophy calls the witnessing consciousness.
Yeah.
Pure, unadulterated awareness.
And this witnessing consciousness is the key to surviving what he calls the wheel of life. Because life isn't static. It's a constant, brutal oscillation between opposites.
Life is entirely a wheel of duality. It is built on contrast. You feel intense hunger, so you eat, and you experience the pleasure of satisfaction.
But that satisfaction is temporary. The wheel turns, the food is digested, and the pain of hunger returns. Deep intimacy is inevitably followed by the pain of separation. Day is followed by night, success by failure.
Most traditional spiritual paths look at this wheel and say, this is suffering. We must escape the wheel. We must detach completely so we never feel hunger or separation again.
But Osho says something radically different.
He says, do not try to escape the wheel, but also do not blindly suffer as it crushes you. Simply step back and watch it. Become the witnessing consciousness.
Watch the hunger arise. Watch the satisfaction follow.
When you observe this eternal rotation choicelessly, meaning you don't desperately cling to the pleasure and you don't violently reject the pain, you transcend the suffering.
You find a silent harmony in the very center of the spinning wheel.
And to really cement this idea of the witnessing consciousness, there's this legendary Sufi parable he tells about the empty book. I think it is the perfect crystallization of everything we've talked about today.
It's such a beautiful story. There was a highly revered Sufi master who had a massive following. For his entire life, he carried a heavy, locked book with him everywhere he went. He never let anyone see it.
Naturally, his disciples became obsessed with it. They were convinced that this locked book contained the ultimate esoteric secrets of the universe, the master's final grand philosophy.
The moment the master finally dies, the disciples don't even wait. They immediately break the lock and tear open the book.
To their absolute shock and dismay, the book is completely blank.
Yeah.
Page after page of nothing.
Except for the very last page where the master had written a single sentence. If you know the difference between the content and the container, you are wise.
If you know the difference between the content and the container, it is the ultimate mic drop.
It really is. Everything we agonize over, our bank accounts, our broken relationships, our fleeting moments of joy, our anxieties, the pseudo problems we invent, all of it is just the content.
It is just ink on a page.
Yeah.
Comes and goes. It is written and erased by time.
But you, the deep, silent, witnessing consciousness, the awareness that is observing the thoughts, you are the container.
You are the vast, empty book that holds the entirety of human experience, yet remains completely unmarked and unchanged by it.
But let me ask you the ultimate skeptical question here at the end.
Sure, let's hear it.
If life is truly just a wandering without a destination, and all our deepest problems are just passing content on a blank page, and there is no grand ultimate meaning to any of it, doesn't this philosophy just lead straight off a cliff into total nihilism?
That is a very common fear.
Why get out of bed? Why paint a painting or love a partner if none of it fundamentally matters?
That is the fear of the ego. It looks at the emptiness and calls it nihilism. But nihilism is just the despair of an ego that has realized it isn't going to get its trophy.
It's the bitterness of a thwarted motive.
Exactly. Osho is pointing to a state far beyond the ego. When you finally drop the exhausting demand that the universe must provide you with a grand, overarching meaning to justify your existence, you are suddenly free.
free to experience the intrinsic, overflowing, unreasonable beauty of the present moment.
The motivation to act no longer comes from a desperate, anxious need to achieve or to ward off death. It comes from an overflow of sheer joy.
It comes from the delight of simply participating in the cosmic dance. You don't sing a song because the song has a meaning or utility or because it will secure your legacy.
You sing the song because the act of singing is a spontaneous celebration of the fact that you are alive.
A celebration in itself. And that brings us full circle right back to the title, God is not for sale.
We cannot transact our way to peace. We cannot buy grace with our suffering. We cannot purchase it with our good deeds. And we certainly cannot achieve it through our exhausting, white-knuckled efforts to be perfect.
We have to drop the achieving mind entirely.
The achieving mind is the primary disease of modern humanity. And this leads to perhaps the most breathtaking and provocative insight in the entire text.
When Osho initiates a new seeker, when someone comes to him desperate for a path, he doesn't hand them a map for a long, arduous 20-year journey of self-improvement.
He does the exact radical opposite. He looks them in the eye and declares in that very moment that they are already perfect.
Which is deeply jarring to us. Our entire economic and social structure is built on the premise of endless, agonizing self-improvement.
Every other spiritual and secular path tells you that you are flawed. They tell you that you must work for lifetimes, accumulate virtue, go to therapy, polish your soul, optimize your routine, and maybe, just maybe, when you are on your deathbed, you will be worthy of peace.
Osho bypasses the entire game. He declares you perfect right now, exactly as you are.
With all your neuroses, your anger, your confusion, your unresolved trauma, the spiritual work is not to aggressively chisel away your flaws until you become perfect.
The work is to drop the anxiety of achieving, to stop treating yourself like a renovation project, and to start celebrating the divine perfection that is already your inherent, unalterable nature. And that is the radical, liberating thought we want to leave you with today. It's a concept that directly challenges the foundation of hustle culture, the billion-dollar self-improvement industry, and the transactional nature of organized religion. What if you are already perfect? Stop treating it like a thought experiment and really feel it. If you truly deeply accepted that you had absolutely nothing left to achieve, no spiritual resume to build, no divine scorecard to worry about, how differently would you move through the world today? Would you finally put down the heavy, exhausting burden of becoming and simply allow yourself to dance? If this deep dive challenged your perspective today, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode. Thank you for listening.